They called her the useless fat girl of high society. But when her own father handed her over to an Apache warrior as punishment, no one could have imagined she would find the purest love ever known. In the golden halls of the Carson Manor, where crystal chandeliers reflected the opulence of one of the most powerful families in the American West of 1875, lived Clara, a 22-year-old whose name stood in cruel contrast to the shame that filled her days. Her sturdy frame, round cheeks, and hazel eyes had been a source of family embarrassment since she turned 16 and failed to secure a single suitor at her debutante ball. "Look how she stuffs herself with pastries again," whispered her mother, Eleanor, watching Clara from the cedar balcony overlooking the sprawling ranch gardens. "A lady of her station should have more restraint." The words fell like venom on Clara's already wounded heart, which found solace in her grandmother's leather-bound books and the sweets she sneaked from the pantry when no one was looking. William Carson, a 55-year-old man whose graying hair spoke of decades building a cattle and railroad empire, gazed at his daughter from his study window with a mix of disappointment and cold calculation. His other four children had married into wealth, expanding the family's fortune and political reach across Texas and beyond. But Clara, his only daughter, had become a growing burden with each year she remained unwed. The night of the Grand Harvest Ball arrived as a desperate last chance. Eleanor had commissioned the most extravagant dress money could buy, crimson velvet with silver thread embroidery, hoping its grandeur might distract from Clara's robust figure. But as Clara descended the oak staircase into the ballroom, the whispers and pitying glances cut like knives. "Who'd dance with a heifer like that?" muttered young Baronet James Holt, not bothering to lower his voice. His words drew nervous chuckles from other young men of the elite, who saw Clara's humiliation as cruel sport. She felt the polished floor might swallow her whole, yet she held the composure years of etiquette had drilled into her. All evening, Clara sat with the older matrons, watching girls her age twirl gracefully with suitors who'd never approach her. Her ivory fan trembled in her hands as she forced a dignified smile, crumbling inside piece by piece. When the ball ended and the family returned to their sprawling estate in a gilded carriage, the silence spoke louder than any rebuke. The next morning, William summoned Clara to his study. The walls, lined with law books and maps of his vast land holdings, bore silent witness to a conversation that would alter Clara's fate forever. William paced, his ebony cane tapping rhythmically on the hardwood floor as he searched for words to voice his frustration. "Clara," he began, not meeting her eyes, "you're 22. By your age, your mother had borne 2 children and secured alliances that strengthened this family. But you," he gestured vaguely toward her, "you've proven a failed investment, a disgrace to the Carson name." The words hit Clara like hammer blows. She'd heard versions of this speech for years, but never with such raw brutality. Her hands clenched into fists in her lap as she fought to stay composed. "I've decided," he continued, "it's time to find a permanent solution to your situation. Tomorrow, an Apache prisoner arrives at the nearby fort, a warrior captured in the latest border skirmishes." William paused at his mahogany desk, picking up an official document. "The authorities have agreed to my proposal. You'll be given to the savage as his companion. At least you'll serve a purpose, keeping a dangerous prisoner in check." Clara's world reeled. For a moment, she thought she'd misheard. "Father," she whispered, voice shaking, "are you serious?" "Completely serious," he replied, his tone icy. "I can't keep supporting a daughter who contributes nothing to this family. This way, your existence will have meaning. You'll prevent us from executing the Apache, and you'll finally have a husband, even if he's a savage." Clara rose slowly, feeling as if she were floating outside her body. "You're selling me to a war prisoner?" she asked, barely audible. "I'm giving you a chance to be useful for the first time," William retorted without a shred of compassion. "His name is Tlacael. Tomorrow you'll be taken to the reservation assigned to him. Consider this your arranged marriage, just with someone of your level." That night, as Clara packed her few personal belongings into a leather trunk, she wept for the first time in years. But amid the tears of pain and humiliation, something unexpected took root, a strange sense of freedom. For the first time, she'd be far from scornful glances, cruel remarks, and the constant weight of being a living disappointment. At dawn, as the carriage pulled away from the manor toward the unknown, Clara didn't look back. She had no idea she was heading toward a meeting that would transform her life in ways she could never have dreamed. The Apache territory stretched under the relentless sun like a land forgotten by time, where red rock cliffs met endless blue skies, and the wind carried tales of freedom and defiance. Tlacael had been brought here not as punishment, but as part of a U.S. government experiment, establishing reservations where captured warriors could live under controlled peace instead of facing execution. The experiment included providing Mexican and American wives to civilize them and produce mixed offspring easier to govern. When the dusty stagecoach stopped before the adobe cabin that would be her new home, Clara stepped down with trembling legs and a heart pounding like a war drum. The desert air was unlike anything she'd known, dry, searing, charged with a wild energy that made her feel strangely alive. Her velvet skirts, so fitting for city ballrooms, looked absurdly out of place in this rugged landscape. Tlacael emerged from the cabin's shadow like a figure from legend. At 28, he was tall and sinewy, his skin bronzed by the desert sun, his black hair falling to his shoulders. His dark eyes held the depth of someone who'd seen both glory and tragedy. When he looked at Clara, she felt judged by someone who saw beyond surface appearances. "This is the woman they send me?" he asked in clear English, with a faint accent, addressing the cavalry officer escorting Clara. His voice carried disbelief that flushed Clara's cheeks with shame. "They think I'll accept someone tossed to me like a bone to a dog?" The officer, a grizzled man used to handling defiant prisoners, hardened his expression. "You've got no choice, Apache. This woman's part of the deal. Treat her with respect, or it's back to the stockade." The threat hung heavy, understood by both prisoners. Clara found her voice for the first time since arriving. "I didn't ask to be here either," she declared with a dignity that surprised even herself. "But here we are, so we'll have to make it work." Her words were direct, free of self-pity, and Tlacael studied her with fresh attention. After the officer rode off, raising a cloud of dust, Clara and Tlacael stood alone before the cabin, two strangers bound by circumstances neither had chosen. The silence stretched vast as the desert, awkward yet brimming with unexplored possibilities. "I won't pretend this is a real marriage," Tlacael said at last, crossing his arms over his bare chest. "You're an imposition by the government, another way to humiliate me." His words were blunt but not cruel, setting ground rules for their forced coexistence. "I understand," Claire replied, startled by her own calm. "I didn't choose this either. My family sent me here to be rid of me. I suppose we're both prisoners in our own way." Speaking her truth so plainly felt oddly liberating. The first days were a cautious dance of avoiding conflict. Tlacael left early to hunt or tend small crops he'd planted, while Clara explored the cabin, adjusting to a life utterly unlike her past. The cabin was simple but sturdy, 2 rooms, a stone hearth kitchen, and handcrafted furniture showcasing Tlacael's skill. It was when Clara found dried medicinal herbs in the kitchen that she discovered their first connection. She recognized plants her grandmother had taught her about in the manor's herb garden: chamomile for calm, comfrey for wounds, willow for pain. Without thinking, she began sorting them by their healing properties. When Tlacael returned and saw her work, he froze. "How do you know herbal medicine?" he asked, examining her arrangement. His tone had lost its earlier edge. "My grandmother was a healer before she married into wealth," Clara explained, touching the dried leaves. "She taught me in secret because my mother thought it unladylike. But I always loved the idea of helping people heal." For the first time since her arrival, Tlacael looked at her with something like respect. "I use these plants for hunting injuries and minor ailments, but some I don't know how to prepare properly." He paused, choosing his words. "Could you teach me?" That simple question sparked a subtle but profound shift in their relationship. Over the following weeks, Clara and Tlacael spent evenings working with the herbs. He shared the desert plant's unique properties, while she taught him her grandmother's preparation techniques. Their hands sometimes brushed while making salves or tinctures, creating fleeting moments of intimacy neither knew how to navigate. One afternoon, as they mixed a balm for sunburn, Clara dared a personal question. "Did you have a family before you were captured?" she asked softly, eyes on her work. Tlacael stilled for a long moment. "I had a wife," he said finally, his voice heavy with grief that squeezed Clara's heart. "Her name was Edsila. She died in a cavalry raid on our village. That's why I fought so recklessly afterward. I had nothing left to lose." Clara looked up, seeing raw pain in his eyes. Without thinking, she touched his hand gently. I'm so sorry, she murmured. She must have been remarkable to inspire such love. She was, he replied, not pulling away. Small, graceful, always laughing. The opposite of, he stopped, realizing what he nearly said. The opposite of me, Clara finished with a quaint but unbitter smile. It's fine. I know exactly what kind of woman I am and what I'm not. I've lived with that my whole life. Tlakel studied her intently. Did your family treat you poorly? He asked bluntly. They treated me like a constant failure, Clara answered with brutal honesty. Since I was a child, I've been the fat daughter who's good for nothing. My only worth was the Carson name, and even that wasn't enough to get me a husband. She shrugged, the acceptance hard-won through years of pain. That night, as they retired to their separate rooms, both carried a new understanding. They were beginning to see each other not as forced strangers, but as wounded souls who might find solace together. The months that followed brought subtle but deep changes to both the desert and their hearts. Clara had started a small medicinal garden behind the cabin, growing herbs suited to the arid climate. Her hands, once soft and manicured as befitted a lady, were now calloused and dirt-stained, yet they'd never felt more purposeful. Clara's physical transformation was clear to anyone who'd known her before. The desert's constant work had tanned her skin and strengthened her body. She'd lost weight naturally, not through her mother's harsh diets, but through an active life and simple, wholesome food. But more striking than any physical change was the new light in her eyes. For the first time, she felt truly useful. Apache warriors from nearby tribes began seeking her out for wounds or illnesses their traditional healers couldn't treat. Clara earned a reputation as a healer, blending ancestral knowledge with Western techniques, creating remedies more effective than either tradition alone. The white woman of the desert can heal what others cannot, warriors said, returning to their tribunes. Though some elders distrusted an outsider, her results spoke for themselves. Children recovered from dangerous fevers under her care. Warriors healed from infected wounds. Women found relief from chronic pain. Tlacayo watched these changes with pride in a deeper feeling he hesitated to name. The woman who'd arrived as a government imposition had become indispensable, not just to him but to the entire community. Each day he found new reasons to admire her strength, compassion, and adaptability. One full moon night, as Clara prepared a tincture for an elder's arthritis, Tlacayo brought 2 cups of herbal tea he'd learned to make under her guidance. Sharing tea at day's end had become their favorite ritual, a time to talk of everything and nothing as the desert glowed silver under moonlight. Do you miss your old life? He asked, sitting on the wooden bench he'd built for these moments. Clara paused her work, gazing at the stars glittering like diamonds in the boundless sky. I miss my grandmother, she said thoughtfully. She was the only one in my family who saw me as more than a failure. But the rest? She searched for words. No, I don't miss feeling worthless every day. I don't miss the pitying looks or cruel remarks. Here, for the first time, I feel I have a purpose. Tlakel studied her profile in the moonlight. The desert had transformed not just her appearance, but her entire presence. Where he'd once seen a defeated woman, he now saw a quiet warrior who'd found her battleground in healing. I miss my old life, he admitted. The freedom to ride the plains without bounds, to hunt where I pleased, to live by my people's ways. His voice softened. But I don't miss the loneliness anymore. After losing Adsila, I thought I'd be alone forever. That part of me died with her. Clara turned to him, sensing they were treading fragile ground. And now, she asked gently. Now, he said, with raw honesty, I wake each morning looking forward to seeing you in your garden. I look forward to our nightly talks. I look forward to watching you heal my people. You've brought something to my life I thought was gone forever. He paused, wrestling with words he'd never expected to say. You've brought hope, Clara. Her name hung between them like a revelation. Clara felt tears stream down her cheeks, tears of joy for the first time in years. Tlakel, she whispered. He moved closer, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face in his calloused hands and kissed her with a tenderness that stunned her. The kiss was soft, reverent, laden with months of mutual respect and growing understanding. When they parted, Clara trembled, not from fear, but from an emotion so intense it threatened to overwhelm her. Are you sure? She whispered. I'm everything your first wife wasn't. You're you, he interrupted firmly. You're not Adsila, and I'm not trying to replace her. You're Clara, the woman who saved my soul when I thought it was lost. The woman who found her strength in the desert and taught me love can bloom in the unlikeliest places. The months that followed were the happiest either had ever known. Their bond deepened naturally, rooted in mutual respect, admiration, and shared purpose. Clara moved through the cabin with a grace she'd never had in ballrooms, and Tlacael smiled more often, surprising visiting warriors. They worked in harmony. He hunted and gathered plants while she tended patients arriving daily. Evenings they prepared medicines together, their movements a practiced dance. Nights were spent under the stars, talking, laughing, uncovering new layers of each other. My tribe needs new trade routes, Tlacael confided one night as they stargazed. The medicines you make could be traded for tools and food we need. You could help not just heal bodies, but mend ties between our peoples. Clara felt a thrill at the idea that her work could ripple beyond individual patients, giving her a purpose she'd never imagined. Would other tribes accept me? She asked, excitement tinged with nerves. They already have, he said with a smile. Your results speak for themselves, but there's more I need to tell you. His expression turned serious. My older brother sent word. He's planning a formal alliance among Apache tribes and wants me in the talks. It means traveling to lands beyond government control. Clara's heart raced. The prospect of greater freedom was exhilarating yet daunting. What does that mean for us? She asked. It means we could have a real marriage by my people's traditions, Tlacael said, taking her hands. You could be my wife, not just a government assignment. His eyes shone with intensity. It means we could start a family, if that's what you want. The word family struck Clara like a bell. After years of being deemed worthless for failing to produce heirs in an arranged match, the chance to build a family from true love felt miraculous. But their joy was shattered when riders appeared on the horizon. Tlacael went on instant alert, recognizing U.S. Army uniforms even from afar. Hide in the cabin, he muttered urgently. Something's wrong. But it was too late. The soldiers had spotted them, and among them rode a figure that froze Clara's blood. Her brother, Edward Carson, accompanied by the officer who'd brought her months ago. Edward dismounted with the arrogance of a man raised to believe the world owed him deference. At 25, he was the epitome of a Western gentleman, impeccably dressed even in the desert, with a neatly trimmed mustache and the cold, calculating eyes inherited from their father. But when he saw Clara step from the cabin, his expression shifted from controlled disdain to outright shock. The woman approaching wasn't the heavy, defeated sister he remembered. Clara walked with a natural dignity she'd never had at the manor. Her tanned skin glowed with health, her body strong and balanced, her eyes alight with purpose. Most unsettling was how Tlacael stood protectively at her side and how she accepted it with ease. Clara, Edward said, voice tight but controlled, I've come to take you home. This experiment's gone on long enough. This is my home, Clara replied calmly, gesturing to the cabin and her medicinal garden. And I'm not going anywhere. Her voice held no trace of the insecurity that had defined her years at the manor. The officer stepped forward, holding official papers. Miss Carson, we've had reports you're being held against your will. As an American citizen, you have the right to return to civilization. Tlacael tensed. No one's holding her, he declared in clear English. She's here by choice. His hand moved instinctively to the knife at his belt, but Clara calmed him with a gentle touch. It's true, she confirmed, addressing the officer directly. I'm here because I've found a purpose and a life worth living. I don't need rescuing from happiness. Edward stepped closer, studying his sister with narrowed eyes. Look at you, he muttered, disgust mixed with what might have been envy. Dressed like a savage, living in a shack, working with your hands like a common squaw. Is this what you call happiness? Yes, Clara said without hesitation. I call happiness waking each morning, knowing my life has value. I call happiness healing people, being respected for my skills instead of scorned for my looks. I call happiness being with a man who loves me for who I am, not the Carson name. Her words landed like thunder in the desert silence. Edward exchanged a pointed glance with the officer. Clearly they've brainwashed you, he declared. Father sent me with clear instructions. If you don't come willingly, I'm authorized to take you by force. Tlacael stepped forward, his presence commanding. "You'll have to kill me first," he said with the calm certainty of a warrior who'd faced death before. "That can be arranged," Edward replied coldly, signaling the soldiers. 6 armed men surrounded the couple, rifles aimed at Tlacao. Clara felt her world collapsing. For months, she'd lived in a bubble of joy, forgetting the power her family wielded to destroy what she'd built. But reality hit hard. She was still a Carson, and that meant she'd never be truly free while her family claimed her. "Fine," she said, voice breaking slightly. "I'll go with you." She turned to Tlacao, whose eyes burned with barely contained rage. "I don't want you hurt because of me." "No," Tlacao growled, gripping her shoulders. "I won't let them drag you back to a life that was killing you." Clara touched his face, memorizing every line, every scar, every look of desperate love. "If you truly love me," she whispered, "let me protect you. I'll find a way back to you, I swear." The journey back to the city was a grueling ordeal of heat, dust, and tense silence. Clara rode among the soldiers like a prisoner, her mind racing for an escape plan. Edward rode beside her, casting occasional glances that mixed triumph with reluctant respect. "Does he really love you?" he asked at last, halfway to the city. "Or is he just using you because you're what they gave him?" Clara met his gaze, surprised by the first personal question he'd asked in years. "He loves me," she said with absolute certainty, "and I love him. He's the first man who's seen me as a whole person, not a failure to be endured." Edward was silent for several minutes. "Father says you'll be sent to the Sisters of Mercy convent," he said finally. "He claims your soul needs cleansing after this." The convent. Clara had heard of it, a place where troublesome women from wealthy families were sent for reformation through years of prayer, penance, and isolation. A prison masked as a religious institution. "And what do you think?" Clara asked, studying her brother's face. "Do I need cleansing?" Edward took his time answering. "I think," he said slowly, "you're the first in our family to find something real. Something not built on money, power, or appearances." He paused, the next words seeming to cost him. "I think Father's jealous because you found what he never had. True love." Those unexpected words sparked the first glimmer of hope Clara had felt since the soldiers appeared. If she'd reached something human in her brother's heart, perhaps others in her family could see the truth too. When they reached the Carson Manor at dusk, William awaited them on the grand porch, his face grim. But when he saw Clara dismount, his expression mirrored Edward's shock. The woman returning wasn't the one he'd sent to the desert. "Clara," he murmured, approaching slowly, "you look different." "I look like someone who's found her place in the world," she replied, head high. "I look like someone who's learned to value herself." William studied his daughter for a long moment. The changes were undeniable. Her slimmer frame, erect posture, glowing skin, and eyes filled with a determination he'd never seen. But most unsettling was the absence of the submission that had defined her before. "Tomorrow you'll go to the convent," he declared, as if force could restore his authority. "The sisters will purge your soul of the heathen influences you've absorbed." "No," Clara said simply, "I won't go to the convent, and I won't let you destroy what I've built." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the evening breeze rustling the cottonwoods. William couldn't recall the last time anyone in his family had defied him so openly. The battle between Clara's past and future was about to ignite. By noon the next day, news of Clara Carson's return from Apache captivity had spread through Texas high society like wildfire. The manor was surrounded by curious onlookers eager to see the woman who'd lived among savages. But their hopes of finding a broken victim were dashed when Clara stepped onto the balcony with a dignity that silenced the crowd. William had summoned Father Michael, the convent's director, to assess Clara's spiritual state. The priest, a stern man of 65 used to handling rebellious women from elite families, arrived expecting defiance. He didn't expect a woman radiating an inner peace he secretly envied. "My child," Father Michael began condescendingly, "I understand you've endured a trying ordeal. Prolonged contact with heathens can corrupt the soul in subtle ways. The convent will help purify your spirit through prayer and penance." Clara listened patiently before responding. "Father, with all respect, my soul has never been purer. These months I've served God by serving others, healing the sick, easing suffering. If that's corruption, I don't understand virtue," Her words rippled like stones in still water. Father Michael exchanged an uneasy glance with William. They'd expected a broken woman needing salvation, not one who spoke of her experience as a spiritual awakening. Furthermore, Clara continued, voice steady, I've chosen not to go to the convent. I've found my true calling, and I can live it better in freedom than behind walls. William stood abruptly, face reddening with fury. You have no say in this. You're my daughter, and while you're under my roof, you'll obey me. Then I won't stay under your roof, Clara replied with unearthly calm. I'll leave tonight if I must. I'd rather sleep under the stars as a free woman than in a gilded cage as a prisoner. Her words stunned the room into silence. Eleanor, who'd been quietly watching her daughter's transformation, spoke at last. Clara, she said, voice trembling, what's happened to you? You've never spoken like this before. What's happened, Mother, Clara replied, turning to her with compassion and resolve, is that I've finally learned to value myself. I've learned my worth isn't tied to finding a husband you approve of or bearing heirs to carry the Carson name. My worth comes from what I can give the world, the lives I can touch and heal. At that moment, the sound of galloping hooves broke the tension. All eyes turned to the windows, where a dust cloud approached the manor. As it settled, it revealed a sight that stole everyone's breath. Tlacael astride his warhorse, but not alone. With him rode a delegation of Apache warriors and several local settlers Clara recognized as patients she'd treated. Tlacael dismounted with feline grace and strode to the manor's entrance. He wore his finest war attire, but white feathers in his hair signaled peace. His warriors remained mounted, forming a protective but non-threatening circle. William stepped onto the porch, flanked by armed ranch hands. What's the meaning of this intrusion? He demanded, his voice betraying nerves. I've come to claim my wife, Tlacael declared, his voice carrying across the courtyard. I've come for the woman who chose freely to be with me and was taken against her will. Clara appeared on the balcony, and when her eyes met Tlacael's, her heart swelled with joy. Tlacael, she cried, racing down the stairs before anyone could stop her. Stop her, William roared, but it was too late. Clara threw herself into Tlacael's arms, and he held her like she was the world's greatest treasure. I thought I'd never see you again, she whispered against his chest. You promised you'd find a way back to me, he replied, pulling back to study her face. But I decided not to wait. I came for you. A settler stepped forward, an older man in simple but neat clothes. Mr. Carson, he said respectfully but firmly, my name's Thomas Reed. This woman saved my grandson's life when city doctors gave up hope. My wife's chronic pain was untreatable until Clara made her remedies. Other settlers followed, each with similar stories. A young woman spoke of Clara aiding a difficult birth. An old man told of her curing a leg-threatening infection. Story after story painted a portrait of a woman who'd found her calling in service. This woman, Thomas Reed continued, isn't a captive needing rescue. She's a healer who's chosen to live among us because her heart belongs here. Taking her from her husband and her work would be a crime against God and humanity. Father Michael, who'd listened silently, stepped forward, his expression softened by the testimonies. Mr. Carson, he said thoughtfully, I've devoted my life to serving God, and I recognize a true calling when I see one. This woman has found her way to serve the Creator. To interfere would be to defy divine will. William faced an impossible position. The evidence was overwhelming. His daughter had found not just happiness, but a purpose that transformed lives. The settlers' testimonies carried a moral weight he couldn't dismiss, especially before the watching community. Eleanor approached Clara slowly, truly seeing her for the first time, not as a failure to be tolerated, but as the remarkable woman she'd become. My daughter, she whispered, tears in her eyes, forgive me. I was so caught up in society's expectations. I never saw what you needed. Clara embraced her mother, feeling a lifelong wound begin to heal. I forgive you, Mother, she said, but my place is with my husband, serving those who need me. Tlacael stepped toward William with solemn dignity. Sir, he said formally, I ask for your daughter's hand in marriage. I vow to love, protect, and support her healing work for all my days. I promise we'll build something beautiful that honors both her heritage and mine. William looked at Clara, radiant with a joy he'd never seen in her at the manor. He looked at Tlacael, whose love for her shone in every gesture. He looked at the people who'd come to testify to Clara's impact. Finally, with a trembling voice, he said, "You have my blessing." 7 years later, in a thriving community grown around the medicinal clinic Clara and Tlacael had founded, the couple watched the sunset from their porch as their 3 children played in the garden. The community had drawn families from diverse backgrounds, Apache, Mexican, Anglo, seeking a place where differences were celebrated, not feared. Clara, now a revered healer whose reputation stretched across the Southwest, leaned against her husband's shoulder with a smile of utter contentment. "Do you ever regret it?" Tlacael asked, as he often did. "Never," she replied, watching their children chase each other through rows of healing herbs they'd planted together. "I found my place in the world. I found my purpose. I found true love. What more could I ask for?" In the distance, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and crimson, blessing a love story that began as punishment and became the greatest gift of all. The end.